Good morning. It is just past 9:30 on February 11th. We're here with two items today for the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. I am rolling solo today here at the dais, but I am here with our planning team and our council staff and other stakeholders who are here, and we welcome you all. We have colleagues who are on virtual for various reasons, and so we'll welcome them and have them chime in and be part of the discussion as we move forward. And I can't see, oh, there we go. We have our committee colleagues, Council President and Councilmember Joando, and we have the District Councilmember Balcom, who has been very active in this plan in the community. With that, why don't we turn it over to Ms. Dunn, and you can walk us through what we're going to go through today here on the second work session as we do role reversal, where I was virtual for the first, and now I'm here in person, and everybody else is virtual for the second.
Great. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. This is the second work session on the Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan. We're going to cover the remaining plan-wide recommendations today. They will cover the environment, parks, historic preservation, and community facilities. With that, we will have a third work session that's going to be held on February 23rd, and it will cover the neighborhood recommendations and the chapter on implementation, and of course anything that ends up as a follow-up item. With that, we're going to head into the first section, which is the environment. This is on pages 67 through 74 in the plan, if people want to follow along in the plan. And just wanted to note that, that while the plan area seems relatively suburban, we took a tour of the area. There is a significant network of streams, forests, and natural habitats. In fact, the entire plan area is in a special protection area, or referred to as an SPA. On the second page of the staff report, you'll see that most of the plan area is in the Clarksburg SPA. There is a portion of it in the 10 Mile Creek SPA. In addition, you have reference in the plan to the priority urban forest, which is a designation by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and you heard testimony about this. For context, wanted to provide in the staff report, you'll see that there are things that the planning board will need to consider when applications come forward with related to being in a priority urban forest, but also wanted to provide a map of the county just to show that, in fact, most of Montgomery County is in a priority urban forest boundary. So it's not unique to Clarksburg. With that, on the third page, we'll get into talking about more specifics on the environment. Cool Brook Tributary is a tributary to Little Seneca Creek, and it runs through the center of the plan area, and this is unique to the plan area. In 1994, the plan designated it for private conservation, and since then, a lot of it remains largely intact. The Clarksburg plan here seeks to extend that protection of the Little Seneca Creek Greenway along the Cool Brook Tributary, and states that it intends this to happen through public parkland expansion or completion of private conservation easements through development approvals. With that, you'll see on the third page of the staff report are the environment goals. Broadly, they are to protect Little Seneca Creek watersheds, tributaries, and follow the protections of the SPAs, to preserve and expand forest stands and non-forest tree canopy and other natural areas, and to implement sustainable site and building design elements into new development. That's it broadly, but it's written in detail for you. And then again, there are numerous environmental recommendations. The first one, they are broken into sections. The first section has to do with environmental site design. And you can see there are recommendations 1 through 6 on pages 3 and the top of page 4. I'm not going to read them all at length because it would take time, but they're all there in detail. And then there are staff comments related to these recommendations. And the first one has to do with recommendation number 1. And just wanted to note that the council did receive testimony concerned with the potential for new development to adversely impact water quality in this area. And just wanted to note that, again, the entire plan area being designated a special protection area confers certain things from the county code upon development. And the county as well. So on that fourth page of the staff report, you'll see that being in an SPA, what that means, there are responsibilities not only for the developer, but for the county as well. The county must monitor, participate in development review, have a conservation plan, and do some annual monitoring or report writing in relationship to the monitoring. And then, of course, there's a list of things the developer of a property within an SPA is also responsible for. And then the third piece I want to mention is that the planning department has a set of environmental guidelines that also anything in a special or a protection area or a sensitive area must follow these very detailed environmental guidelines in development. So it lists for you on the page some of the objectives of the environmental guidelines, and at the top of page 5, again, just notes that the guidelines are to provide detailed criteria and methods for regulatory review when developing in a sensitive area. And these sensitive areas include streams and their buffers, 100-year floodplains, habitats of rare, threatened, or endangered species, steep slopes, as well as wetlands, springs, and seeps. So while council staff understands that the community might be concerned that there could be an impact on water quality, the first recommendation to meet or exceed the established requirements of a property in these areas seems to be a sufficient recommendation in a master plan at the master plan level. If after monitoring, the county finds that more specific or stricter monitoring or regulation needs to happen, that could happen through the SPA regulation itself or the environmental guidelines. I'll pause. Any questions?
Just
Nope.
put your little hand up if you need. I think that was a thumbs up from Councilmember
Yeah.
Jawanda. Okay, good.
Great.
Thumbs up. Okay.
No questions from me,
All
so
right,
you
great.
know. I can't put the hand up, but no
All right.
questions.
Just chime in, Madam President. Chime in. All right, let's continue.
Great, thank you. Under recommendation 3, there's reference to the term feasible, and again, we've had this conversation between the committee and the council, which prefer to use the term practicable instead of feasible, noting that something could be feasible but at a very high cost, not even just a monetary cost, it could be a different type of cost, so that really it's preferable to use the word practicable in this case.
That's consistent with what we've done in prior plans, so I don't see any concern, so
Okay.
we'll accept without objection.
Okay. And then on to recommendation number 6. The council heard testimony both in support of and opposed to a proposed 200-foot residential building setback from the I-270 right-of-way that had been included in the public hearing draft. Because it had been raised in testimony, council staff is raising it here again for conversation. What the board chose to recommend instead was retaining a requirement for a noise study and construction of a sound wall or a raised berm and a 50-foot native tree and landscaped buffer between any new development and I-270. The board also included text which would allow them to approve exceptions or variations to this buffer where visibility from I-270 is requested or for other reasons deemed appropriate to proposed development. As the council may recall, or committee from their tour, there was a conversation about impacts from being near roadways, including the roadway-based air pollution on people's health, living in the area, working or playing nearby. But these things can be mitigated by distance from the roadway, steeper topography, and forested buffers. That was the primary conversation. And while the research does not provide one optimal setback, the research in general agrees that mitigation to most of the detrimental health impacts occurs with some combination of distance, topography, and buffer. So the council staff's comment is that the committee might want to consider or specify that in granting an exception to the forested buffer for visibility or other reasons, any residential use impacted by that exception must be set back a minimum of 125 feet from the I-270 right-of-way. This would end up being approximately 200 feet from the nearest travel lane. I have provided at the bottom of page 5 a proposed edit to the draft. We can have the committee discuss it. There could also be a different edit that still provides a little more flexibility for the planning board, which would read that in providing this exception, the board should consider a 125-foot setback for any residential use. So you could make it as it is in the staff report here that just says in granting any exception, the residential use must be set back 125 feet from the I-270 right-of-way, or an alternative would be in granting the exception, the board should consider 125 feet setback for any residential use.
Appreciate that. I know we received some feedback and detailed memo from our district council member colleague. I didn't know if she wanted to weigh in here. I think
Sorry about that. So I was in favor of the this amendment. However, I think that the consider versus must gives flexibility to the planning board.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that as well. Councilmember
Yeah.
Joando?
Just if there's any, I'm not sure. I just would love to hear from planning and if we have, I don't know if we have DEP or DOT, or if there's any comments. I'd like to hear if there's any thoughts from the staff, but I was comfortable with it as it was, but I would love to see if there's any feedback.
Sure, let's hear from planning, and then if there's anybody else from an executive agency that wants to speak, they can join us as well.
Yeah, this is Artie Harris, Chair of the Planning Board. Our staff may have some comments, but I would just like to say that the board would prefer the latter, which should consider 125, because I feel that it depends. We don't know exactly what plan's going to be part before the board, and so we'd like to be able to have some flexibility depending on whatever plan comes before the board at the time. So I would prefer, the board would prefer the flexibility to consider 125.
Yeah, thank you. Staff can work with that. I think that's very, very clear, allows the flexibility. Having read the council staff report, I think we all understand what the concern was, and in response to the testimony received, I think this makes sense, and we can make that work.
Okay.
Is there anything specific you had a question on?
No. I just,
okay.
That sounds to me that you're saying you're going to work to make it that, but if there's some limited exception, you can make it work within the flexibility there but that's the goal, seems like.
Right. Absent an actual application and seeing, where, I think we can make this, there's plenty of flexibility there to make this recommendation work.
Great. Okay. I'm fine.
Okay.
Me too, I'm fine. So you know.
Thank you. All right. Well, great. Then we have a 3-0 recommendation on that.
Great, thank you. Moving on, there are recommendations at the very bottom of page 5 starts the section on natural resource protection and enhancement, and the planning board continues the recommendations for this section with sequential numbering. You have recommendations 7, 8, 9, and 10 on the next page. Council staff went through them in detail and doesn't have any suggested recommended changes to them, and recommends the committee recommend to the council approval of the natural resource protection and enhancement recommendations as written. Good.
Yeah.
The next section is on climate change, resilience, and sustainability. Recommendation 11 has to do with providing a minimum of 35% green cover over the property's total developed area. We'll get into that in a few minutes. It's in the comment section of council staff. The 12th recommendation that new development and improvements to existing development should plant shade trees and use highly reflective material to create a cooler environment. 13 has to do with site design and building location, should be oriented with taking advantage of solar angles and wind. And then 14, encourage new development and improvements to exceed the county's minimum energy standards or strive for net zero, net positive, and or living building standards, and provide a bunch of techniques for doing that. So we're now in the middle of page 7, and council staff comments on recommendation 11 have to do with the 35% green cover. It's a little complicated. I'm going to talk you through what I thought, and then of course answer any questions. I wanted to note that 6 out of the 16 area master plans approved in the last decade have included a 35% green cover requirement. However, the area on which the 35% requirement is calculated has varied across these plans, as well as what qualifies as green cover. There's a circle page attachment if you want to see what that is. For example, Tacoma Park, the minor master plan amendment, 35% Green cover was measured on the site's impervious area. For Great Seneca, the 35% was measured across the site. And for the University Boulevard, it was written as 35% of the developable area. As we just mentioned in this plan, the recommendation is to provide 35% green cover on the property's total developed area, calculated on a net tract basis, and then goes on to say excluding roadway dedication areas and environmental buffers. Site, developable area, and net tract are relatively interchangeable terms. They define the area of an application that do not include the areas of dedication. So there are kind of two new things going on here. One is the reference to environmental buffers, and I think that's new for this plan and this plan area because there are so many sensitive areas. And what it strives to do is to say, when looking at 35% green cover and you have environmental buffers, do not count that in the base, and also do not count it toward the green cover area. And council staff thinks that's extremely appropriate in this location and in this area because, one, you're going to have them. It's not confusing if you've spelled out that they're not in the base and they are not also to count toward green cover. They are sensitive areas, and the rationale for the green cover is that these are green areas that should provide green areas to enhance the built environment. So when we think of an environmental buffer, it's not really designed to do that. But the other element here, which is a little bit new, is the referencing net tract and referencing the rights of way, but not other dedicated areas. We'll get to discussion of that in a second. Just want to also mention that the features that qualify as green cover vary across these plans as well. All plans that have the 35% requirement have counted an intensive green roof or tree canopy as green cover, and more recent plans have added vegetative cover, landscaped areas, rain gardens, and bioswales to this list. You'll see that in the list here, they have also added landscaped parkland, privately owned open spaces, privately owned public spaces, open space and rec areas. And then lastly, this plan states that features counting as green cover may be located on private property, as all the other plans also say, but this is new in that in this plan, dedicated areas to public rights-of-way or parkland, the areas there can also count toward the green cover, so that's new. And the effect of this is that if you have an area of dedication that you are not including in the base, and then you have an area of dedication, such as the right-of-ways, that you are allowing to count as green cover, you aren't quite getting 35%. Now, in this plan, I think it's really worth noting, and this is at the top of page 8, that unique to this plan, allowing the counting of green cover on dedicated areas such as roadways and parkland is a good change. And it's a good change because we really have a different environment than we've had in other plans that have added green cover, which were much more urbanized areas. Here we've got a green field where the development is going to be coming in and they're going to be creating these rights of ways and creating new parkland and dedicating much of the property for it. And so allowing them to count as green cover where there's value to having really great street trees in new paved areas and new parkland is great for this location and makes sense. It seems a little odd that we treat the areas of dedication differently when counting the base for how should we calculate the 35%? That's what I was trying to get at. So in the middle of page 8, you'll see a recommended edit to this section, which tries to remove that distinction between whether roadways or different areas of dedication are included or not included. It just basically says if you have a developable area, or basically a tract, then that's where we're going to count the green cover requirement on that amount of land, because when you go to develop it and you put down the roadways and you include the parks, you can actually count those green covered areas where they haven't counted before. And then the only other caveat here is the very last thing in the list that is a specification on what counts as green cover. Council staff would suggest taking out because it's really already covered in the other text above it, and it's a little confusing because the text specifically says that you can count green cover in parkland, on public parkland and public right-of-ways, and it counts as vegetated areas and landscaped areas. So including E is just kind of confusing. It would be as if you would put the word median in that list. It doesn't make sense. So I'll stop there and take questions.
There's a couple things that you've raised. One, the substantive issue here that I think we should talk about. I'd like to hear from planning on, and then from colleagues. And the other is the discrepancy among plans, that we don't always treat this the same, and would like to talk a little bit about that. Is that just we view this differently now, and plans evolve over time, and we're setting a new standard? We can't relitigate the inconsistencies of every other plan. We're only here to take up one plan. So this isn't a countywide functional plan where we would be amending other plans in the policy decisions that we make. But I do think we frequently in master plans and sector plans set established standards that then prospectively become the new standard as those plans come back up, and areas tend to come up every 20 to 30 or 40 years. That becomes the standard in which we utilize and try to be consistent there. So I wouldn't want something to be inconsistent with what we just did or what we're going to do next. But I have, I don't know, less concern, but I think there's less we can do about the fact that we have lots of plans, and some of them have more outdated land use and environmental sustainability, transportation standards than we would approve today if we were going through them. So let's dig in a little bit on that. I'll turn to planning.
Well, I'll just say quickly, from a policy standpoint and plan by plan consistency standpoint, this isn't an ordinance requirement. It's a green cover, and how we try to apply it is to quite literally green up development where buildings, parking lots, actual development is supposed to occur. And so given climate change effects, reducing heat island effects, making places more comfortable for people to live and walk, there's the actual temperature outside versus feels like temperature, all those things. It's that is the intent of green cover. And so I'll say, in general, we've tried to apply these consistently, but given that there's not a hard and fast law, it's also meant to be context sensitive based on the type of plan or area that a particular community may be located geographically within the county. There may be more of an aggressive approach in certain areas. I'll go back to Farrell and Briggs Cheney with the Auto Mall, a dramatic amount of surface parking lot. We had some unique recommendations there to help offset what was one of the hottest areas in the county. And so I think, it's good to be consistent, but I would expect that there might be a standard deviation or two as each of these recommendations come forward in their unique areas of the county.
So planning staff is essentially, these should be context driven, and this is part of the point of having an area master plan, that you do want some variability that is context driven to the community, to the area, to the environmental realities or the current land use patterns.
Yeah, I'm saying there may not be a one-size-fits-all approach. We'd have to evaluate that based on each community.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I understand that. I appreciate that response. Anything from the chair?
No, I agree that we said there was no size fits all. Plus, this is a huge area where there's going to be a lot of dedication, and we want to be able to the green in those dedicated areas to be covered as green areas in the the calculation. So that's why we wanted as much flexibility in this case. But the ultimate goal is to provide the green covered, because we don't want a lot of pavement. We don't want a lot of heat islands, and so we feel that this is a great way to move this forward.
Got it. Okay. Any comments from colleagues?
Yeah, just a question. Yeah, thank you. So the new things here, Ms. Dunn, could you point those out again, like the green roof, 6-inch? What are the things that would be allowed to be counted that are new here?
The things allowed to be counted as new aren't necessarily the features. Those literally have been becoming more and more systematic over the last few master plans. They started with green roofs and tree canopy, and then they added these other things, except for the very last one. So that's all consistent. basically stating that you can now count the areas, the dedicated areas in the green cover calculation. So prior, the language was always on site or things where that dedicated area was removed. So this is allowing it on dedication areas, which, again, like I said, I think it makes sense in an area of greenfield where they're going to be providing a lot of dedicated infrastructure.
Right, where you know you're going to get it. The concern here isn't that you're not going to have the dedicated area. There's room to do it. So
There's
in
a
this
lot.
case,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes more sense. But in another, it might not. That might not be the way to go.
Correct.
Which it sounds like would be consistent with the previous conversation. So okay, I'm fine. Thank you.
Same thing with me. I have no issues here.
Okay, no issues. Councilmember Balcom, any comments? No issues? Okay.
So are we supportive
Yeah.
of the slight edit to this section?
Yeah, so the question exactly is, do colleagues want to go with the staff edit, or do we want to keep the plan as it is? And are there, do we want to go back to planning quickly and see if there are strong feelings one way or other, what the practical application would be in terms of the difference?
I think based on the conversation, we were fine with the change should the committee decide to go that route.
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we will go with the edit by staff. Let's continue.
Okay. We are now on recommendation 14 under staff comments. It's on page 9. There was a recommendation to encourage adaptable use of buildings for a unique, large, or architecturally outstanding buildings instead of complete demolition and reconstruction. The only comment here is it seems a little bit counter to a later recommendation by the board, which does not designate the concept building, and in a sense this is all this could be really referring to. So just suggesting we change, rather than encourage, just change it to support. It's not as if we don't believe that's still something you'd want to support, but encourage is a little stronger when not recommending designation.
Seems like a modest edit. No objections from planning, no objections from colleagues, without objection.
Okay, now we're going to move on to Parks, Open Space, and Recreation. This section is pages 75 through 87 in the plan. And as the plan notes, there are portions of 5 MNC PPC parks within the plan area covering more than 110 acres. However, the amount of available recreation amenities in the parks, including trails, is very limited. And so the Clarksburg plan seeks to expand available park and recreation amenities within the plan area, improve access to the expansive existing resources beyond it. So you'll see on the bottom of page 9, there are goals related to parks, open space, and recreation. It goes to the top of page 10. And then you have the recommendations on parks, open space, and recreation. And these are broken down into 2 groups. There is existing MNC PPC parks, and then in a few minutes we'll get to proposed MNC PPC parks. So the existing parks are Clarksburg Neighborhood Park and Dowden's Ordinary Special Park. There's Little Seneca Greenway and North Germantown Greenway Stream Valley Parks. There's Black Hill Regional Park. And all of the recommendations related to these existing parks tend to be in categories related to better connectivity to the parks, better signage, wayfinding, things that involve coordination with MCDOT or general services. We could look at them all in detail, but council staff suggests the committee support these. There was only one slight change, and it was to recommendation 9. And this one was in reference to Montgomery Park should investigate potential appropriate uses such as a natural surface trail, conservation use, and stormwater management for a small portion of parkland, which is east of I-270, especially as adjacent properties redevelop. And this is a small piece of parkland, again, like I said, east of I-270 of the Lithicum property. And as the plan evolved, and the plan is now recommending not just one large park, but a constellation of parks, this might be a location where a park would be considered, in which case we'd want to also add to that list of uses appropriate for that land as active recreation. And so that's the edit you'll see in the middle of page 11.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. Also in this plan area is existing Little Bennett Regional Park or just outside, and Ovid Hazen Wells Recreational Park, and there are 2 recommendations there of the same vein of working with MCDOT and State Highway to make better pedestrian and bikeway connections to these areas. And council staff suggests the committee recommend approval of these parks and open space recreation, the goals, and the recommendations on existing MNC PPC parks as amended.
Okay. Without objection.
Great. Now we're at the recommended MNC PPC parks, and their title is Constellation Park. And you'll see that it starts at the top of page 12 is the 12th recommendation in the section. And it is that in response to community input and in accordance with the PROS plan, the sector plan recommends creation of Constellation Park, which is actually a number of parks. And it goes on to provide
It's a constellation of parks.
constellation of parks should be what it says. We have an S that goes in there on occasion. So it provides design guidance, it provides amenities, it provides implementation guidance. Those are all on page 12 of the staff report. And then I have some comments related to it. Those are on page 13. I'll just talk about this briefly, then I want to turn it to park staff. Basically, the Plan Board's recommendation for a constellation of parks across the plan area that's located centrally along or near the future observation drive. It's a change from the public hearing draft that had recommended Clarksburg Gateway Local Park as an 8 to 10 acre park to be provided in the same vicinity. However, the public hearing draft did also include a statement that the objectives for the Clarksburg Gateway Local Park could be met via an integrated set of smaller spaces. So it was also an idea present in the public hearing draft. Council staff has just a suggestion of a handful of what I think of are more minor edits, but one worth noting that in the implementation section, council staff has added a reference to the goal of providing an 8 to 10 acres of park land for the community, as was a goal in the public hearing draft. That piece of it has not been retained between the public hearing draft and the planning board draft. And while they do list all of the amenities that they hope to get out of the future parkland, you'll see that the proposed edit on the top to middle of page 14, it just, under the implementation, adds that in development review, the planning board will determine the form, scale, location, configuration with an ultimate goal. So it's just a goal, not a hard and fast thing, of 8 to 10 acres of new parkland provided as, I would strike a single park because that was a holdover from the public hearing draft I had copied and pasted. So I would actually strike just a single park out of that and put parkland provided as a constellation of parks across the plan area. So again, this isn't noted to any particular property. It's to give the community an idea of what it would mean to get all of those amenities. How much parkland might that actually look like? Because if you just read the list and you aren't familiar with parks, you might think, is that 1 or 2 parks? Is it 1 acre? Is it 3 acres? Like, how much green are we going to get? And so it's just this general indicator. And with that, I will turn
Yeah,
to
so
parks.
let me turn it over to parks. My sense of this is that it wasn't lost in the conversation, that it was intentional to go from amount to activation. I mean, that was at least my read of it. I want to have this conversation to determine that. There is value in green space for the sake of green space, but parks has increasingly been moving towards really focusing on the activation of space. And so there's one thing to get a piece of land that is available for recreation, but not activated for any type of specific recreation, and a difference between that and a pickleball court, or that and a field that is, playable and usable, or a dog park or a skate park or some other, amenitized use. And my sense was the goal was to have that, rather than be, activated by the county and the state and the Parks Department, be delivered as part of, a development, hopefully, but to space it out in a reasonable way that seems more equitable both to the residents who might have impacts and not want a pickleball court next to their window because of the noise, or, fair to do it in phases because, a large development is likely to be built out in multiple phases. That was my read. I just want to make sure I understood that. Having said that, I don't necessarily have a problem with, having a number. I will say if we're going to set a goal and it's just a general goal, I don't think we should have a range. I think we should just pick a number if we're going to do that. I would say a goal of 8 instead of a goal of 8 to 10 or a goal of 9. You pick the number that makes sense. But I do want to hear from Parks and just make sure that my understanding is what the conversation was and what Parks' intention is here.
Yes, thank you. Mitty Figueredo, Director, Montgomery Parks. And I do appreciate the opportunity to explain some of the thinking behind the changes in the recommendations. As you stated, they weren't so much lost. They were an intentional decision that we made in the plan that went to the planning board and was approved by them as the draft plan. So we have 37,000 acres of parkland in Montgomery County. You hear me say that all the time. 2/3 of that amount is held in conservation. Our challenge has been increasingly on the operating side, the money to maintain the parks that we already have, and then on the development side, the capital funds to turn parkland into developed parks. What we are finding is in recent development proposals, site plan reviews, is that where there is a number as to acreage for a park, we might very well get that parkland delivered to us in dedication during the site plan process, but that's all we get. And then we're challenged to actually turn that parkland into an amenity that the community can use. So the recommendation for the number, what we found, does create the expectation in the community, not that there will be a number of acres that are delivered, but that a park will be delivered. And those are two different things. So what we're trying to do here is recalibrate that and create in the master plan the ability for the Parks Department to, during development review, actually get amenities, because this is our understanding is that this is a master plan that intends to, on the developable parcels here, deliver housing. And that will bring residents, and those residents need parks to go to, not just park land that's not developed. And, in this area, as you can see noted in the plan, we've got Black Hill nearby. There's going to be new conservation parkland as part of the park. But what we need here in connection with this development are amenities. And we want to be able to negotiate that during development review and not end up in a situation like we've seen in some projects in Bethesda and White Flint, where we get dedication but no park, and then we don't have the capital resources to immediately develop that land into a park. We're holding on to a lot of parkland that's not developed and that we need to develop. And although council staff didn't, now all of that said, we can live with this amended language. I mean, I think it's probably the reality is it's going to be closer to 8 when all is said and done. So we're picking a number. I would recommend 8, but we can live with this language. I do want to say, and council staff hasn't gotten to this yet, so I don't want to get sort of ahead of her on this, but a little bit later there is a proposed change that, in my opinion, might make it a little bit more challenging for us to actually exact what we need to during development review. We want to give ourselves a firm list of amenities in this plan, what we're looking for, and then give the Parks Department the leeway to maybe make some changes to that list if we feel it's necessary. But we want it, since we've taken the acreage out, it's really important that we list the amenities. That is going to be critical for us, I think, as we go through development review. And that's a language, that's a change that's just a little bit later. I didn't want to jump the gun.
I just want to say it's actually a little bit before this.
It just
so precedes it.
Top of 14.
Oh, you're correct.
So,
you're correct.
She
Yes.
covered, through that.
Right.
But that is covered. So I think both are important. I think, why don't we go one at a time? And
Yeah.
We can go with this first question of the language specifically related to the acreage and see where colleagues are. It sounds like there is an appetite among parks to, you said live with the language, prefer 8 if we do it. Council staff had amended her own recommendation to get rid of a single park or So that would be an option, or to not do it. I think those would be the two options, it sounds like, that are, more or less on the table. And then we can go back to the question of the amenities, because I was going to ask you, if we include this language, what do you think is needed in order to accomplish a goal that I share as well of the delivery of activated park space, which is really what we want to deliver in these types of communities, and increasingly what the strategic plan for the Parks Department, the PROS plan, has really called for, the thrive of parks, essentially, which doesn't get talked about as much as it should, but it's a great plan. So I think one of your parts is keep that in, it sounds like, is part of the argument. But let's take that next. Let's start here, and let me turn to colleagues to see what folks think about I'll call it the amended staff recommended language with the deletion of a single park and the edit of 8. So there's not a goal and a range.
Sure, yeah, I can chime in.
Please.
Yeah, I've been following the conversation. I think I'm comfortable with that. It makes sense to me after hearing the Parks Director and council staff. I think, as you said, the goal here is, we want to make sure we're prioritizing and making sure that we have these access to these great parks, and that's recognized in the master plan, not just parkland. So I think it's an important amenity. So if we think that gets to it, it sounds fine. Sounds fine to me.
Council President.
I can jump in. I'll say, honestly, I was absolutely fine with leaving it as the planning board draft has stated this whole section. But I also don't want to be the one who's going to be, I don't want to be the 2-to-1 person.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with going along, but I was absolutely fine with the parks recommendation as it was stated personally.
Okay, I actually probably more leaning your way too, but let's hear from the district council member, see what her thoughts are, and we can decide.
So thank you. First off, I love the idea of the Constellation Parks. I think they will be much more usable, more walkable, and I think that the community is going to gain a lot more from smaller parks versus one big park. We've got Black Hill right across the street. So I think this works. I do think that there's some benefit to a goal. So for instance, having a goal of 8 acres signifies that we're not talking about tiny little pop-ups. We're talking about something that's more substantial. I do think that the rest of the section lays that out clearly. I think that that's an expectation. Having a number, having a goal strengthens that. But I don't have strong feelings either way.
All right, so your preference is to have the number, to go with the amended staff update?
Yes.
Slight preference. All right, I'm going to go slight. I could go either way here too, but I'm going to go slight preference to yield to the district council member, to her slight preference, and so is that a 3-0 recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Agreed. Sounds good. We will agree to that language. Oh,
But the number?
Mr. Chair, yeah, the number will be 8.
Okay, great.
So the amended language, since we've been around this a bit, let me continue, or let me just reiterate. It will read in red on page 14, so everybody knows what we're looking at. The new language will read, with the ultimate goal of 8 acres of new parkland provided as a constellation of parks across the plan area. Okay. 3-0 with that change. Okay, now let's talk about the amenities. I think particularly because we just made this change, I think it's important especially to keep in the list of amenities as discussed. My willingness to go along with that is kind of contingent on keeping this. So I'll just put that out there It sounded like that's where colleagues also were, but I didn't want to presuppose, so let me turn it over to colleagues if they have any concern with keeping this in. No concern. Okay, great. So we're all on the same page. We'll keep in the language of the amenities without change as requested by the Parks Director, although we have council staff.
I just have a suggestion on a different edit from, not trying to
the
debate
considered
the
for-
edit. But no, it is, at a minimum, the following amendments, we will go back to should be included. We'll keep the word included. I think we need to strike in the new park or, because again, it's kind of like what was,
Yeah,
I
should
had
be
accidentally
included
put in
and
there.
then just get
Should be included.
across the network of
Exactly,
connected parks. Thank
yeah.
you.
I think that was partially what was also confusing. So
And do you
that'll
wanna-
be the only edit.
And your stylistic edit are large enough to accommodate these amenities?
Yeah.
All right, that's just a stylistic change, but without
Yeah.
objection
And
on
that's-
that.
And then not remove the last sentence per the request of the parks.
Can you explain just that first?
Yeah,
Can council staff explain that
so
first?
if you go to the top of 14.
Yep.
The council staff recommendation, it would read, at a minimum, the following amenities should be included across the network of connected parks. Okay, so
Yes,
essentially ignore the original staff recommendation,
Understood.
slightly tweak to that to reflect the constellation. And then the other edit is stylistic on the third line, and the park areas are large enough to accommodate these amenities.
Okay.
Just a stylistic
Yes.
change.
Yes. And then leaving in,
And then the final sentence would remain,
okay. Yes, thank you.
just to confirm,
Yep.
importantly.
Okay.
Okay, and just, okay, we're good on that. Everybody's on the same page. 3-0 on that change, and we will continue.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to the next park, which is Coolbrook Stream Valley Park. Coolbrook tributary, as we've mentioned, is a tributary of Little Seneca Creek. The Parks Department provides recommendations related to establishing parkland along the tributary, exploring the feasibility of creating natural surface trails along it. The only comment that staff had is it references that the 13th recommendation is also in the environment section, although it's just slightly different in the environment section because it does reference in that section supporting conservation easements as well. And so rather than parkland should establish parkland along the tributary, I just put explore expanding, but I'm not going to die over that one if there's a problem with it.
Any view from Parks,
No.
from planning staff?
Clark Larson with Montgomery Planning. I would just point out that this recommendation specifically is about the area of the Coolbrook tributary south of Shawnee Lane. So it was intentionally targeted for potential parkland expansion, doesn't require it, but it doesn't speak to parkland expansion north of Shawnee Lane in this section here specifically. So it is more unique in that way.
So we can leave the language as the board has
Okay,
recommended.
unless there's any concern from colleagues, we'll just leave the language as it is.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
It's fine.
So at this point, we are gonna, and then just a nod that the committee recommends approval of the Parks, Open Space, and Recreation recommendations in the recommended park section as modified, as we've discussed here today.
Okay,
Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it to Mr. Kinney to cover the wildlife crossing section.
Thank you. As we had mentioned in the transportation section had a recommendation that there should be wildlife crossings across transportation facilities, but did not specify how and deferred that to the parks section. So here we are. Recommendation 15 recommends that the State Highway Administration and or MCDOT create wildlife passages at the following locations, and then has a few sub-bullets. Recommendations A, B, and C recommend crossings under bridges that are to be created. So at Observation Drive and Little Seneca Parkway, as well as certain points on Observation Drive and Little Seneca Parkway. Their recommended alignments would create new bridges over stream valleys. Recommendations A, B, and C recommend that there be wildlife crossings under those bridges parallel to the stream valley, which is common in a lot of locations around the county, and so would create that here due to the sensitive habitats and great the numbers of wildlife through this area. Recommendation, I apologize, there's at the top of page 16, there's I-270 crossings that should be D and E rather than A and B. These continue to be under recommendation 15, and they're referenced later as such. The I-270 crossing recommendations are that, or sort of as it's listed here, A, but in the plan it's D, is that a new passage over the bridge for wildlife over 270 be planned, and then E is that a recommendation for when the West Old Baltimore underpass of I-270 is reconstructed, that it include a wildlife crossing. The West Old Baltimore recommendation kind of goes hand in hand with the recommendation that the committee approved in the planning board draft for the side path to go through this underpass. And so, when we're rebuilding the underpass, we can, the SHA or, can evaluate how wide it needs to be to accommodate both wildlife passage and a shared use path, kind of working from a blank slate. Council staff comments focus on recommendation 15D, the wildlife passage over 270 on one of the bridges, likely the bike and pedestrian bridge that's recommended to go parallel to Little Seneca Parkway in the plan. This would be a new artificial wildlife passage over the existing highway of I-270. There's not a fiscal impact assessment currently, and as there aren't really peer examples, and we'll get to that in a minute, but this approach generally would be expensive as it would greatly expand the required width of the Little Seneca Parkway Bridge or interchange that would be built. Council staff and with the help of planning staff and park staff, which we appreciate, have included an illustrative example of kind of, an order of magnitude of what this, additional strip of area over a bridge would look like in figure 1 on page 16 of the plan. This is not exactly what the design would be, of course, but this is meant to be illustrative for the additional width that would be required. And council staff also, with the help of planning staff, looked into this and found this approach to be uncommon. There are no real examples of quite this approach in Montgomery County or the state of Maryland, but there's something close, which is depicted on the top of page 17 of the staff report, which is where the ICC dips under a grassy section parallel to Old Mill Run in Olney. But in this case, the highway was built under the grassy section rather than a grassy bridge being built over the highway. So given the likely cost and lack of precedent, council staff suggests the committee recommend removing recommendation 15D, so just that overpass for wildlife from recommendation 15 of the plan, as well as its accompanying language, which we can tidy up as needed after approval.
Essentially, let's get them a wildlife crossing, but let's allow for some flexibility to figure out how.
So council staff is recommending removing the recommendation for a wildlife passage over I-270.
Right. So you're essentially saying we need to have a wildlife crossing, but let's allow some flexibility to figure out how, over or under or some other viable alternative.
The council staff has provided language that would kind of open this up to flexibility.
I'm trying to summarize what council staff was recommending. So that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. It sounds like the district council member in her memo agrees with council staff recommendation with a thumbs up. Any objection from colleagues? Thumbs up and waves. So we'll, without objection, accept the council staff recommendation, which I was doing a lousy job of summarizing, obviously. All right, let's continue.
Thank you. We are on the bottom of page 17 at this point, and moving into recreation facilities. And the plan has language to talk about a community recreation center, as the council's aware, in which we've had a lot of testimony on recently, the need and the desire for a Department of Recreation facility in the Up County. There's a recommendation in the plan that this plan would support the development of a recreation center in or near the plan area. Relevant county department should be consulted about the viability of such a facility as part of the development review process for any proposed development in the plan area. And council staff's comment, this pretty much came out of going on the tour and seeing the area, suggests that recommendation 16 could be edited and would be edited as follows. It says this plan supports the development of a recreation center in or near the plan area. The Lithicum East Elementary School reservation site, which is currently owned by MNC PPC, should be considered as a potential location for this facility. In addition, then the relative departments should be consulted about the viability as part of development review for applications that come in. It's not meant to be a hard recommendation here. It is basically just saying if anyone is going to have a conversation about the reserved school site, it could also be a potential and could be a conversation about its appropriateness for a recreation center.
We have a memo from the district council member with strong, enthusiastic support. Let me turn to her.
Yes, thank you. I think that this is a great idea. It's an outside the box idea. It came in through the public hearing, and I think that it's certainly worth looking at. It doesn't tie anybody down. It doesn't say that the property is going to move. It's just a matter of considering this school site, and given the decline in enrollment and the new Cabin Branch school, which was just opened. So I think this is a great idea, and I hope that we can keep it in.
Agree to agree. Good example of great ideas at public hearings, and that our best ideas don't have to be ours. So thank you to the community for raising these issues. It is helpful and makes us get to a better process and a better plan. And that'll be 3-0 with the thumbs up from colleagues. Oh, sorry, Councilor Drawn. I didn't see. I didn't see. I thought I saw an actual thumbs up, but not a hand. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, just briefly, I appreciate Councilmember Balcom's letter and the suggestion from folks. This is I think something we're going to have to look at holistically as the enrollment changes, and this could be a really good example of a way to utilize space for community use that's already set aside for another community use. So really agree, and just wanted to thank her for putting it forward in the community member. So thank you. So I'm obviously in support.
Great. 3-0 on that. So let's continue.
Thank you. The plan goes on to have 2 recommendations related to public school facilities. In addition to improved wayfinding for Clarksburg Neighborhood Park, Clarksburg High School, and Rocky Hill Middle School, recommendations are related to exploring the possibility of lighting existing tennis and basketball courts at the middle school, and then a recommendation that MCPS and Parks should coordinate to consider temporary uses for the Lithicum East Reserved School site. You'll see that I've made a similar edit to that recommendation 18, just so that it also would include the Department of Recreation in any potential interim use that could be just considered. Again, this is not a strong, must happen. It's a MCPS, Montgomery County Department of Rec and Parks, should coordinate to consider temporary uses for the Lithicum East Reserve School site, provide any public use or enjoyment prior to building. I just put on the site, depending on the anticipated need and timing of new construction. Just kind of opens that door.
Okay, any concerns? No concerns, no objections. Without objection, we will accept the staff recommendation.
Great. And then there are other public open spaces where the board has provided recommendations. You'll see those at the bottom of page 18 and the top of page 19, and council staff suggests that the committee support these recommendations as well as the others as amended.
Without objection.
Okay. We are now moving to historic preservation. This is on pages 88 through 94 of the plan. Within the boundary of the Clarksburg plan, there are sites and districts that are previously listed in the master plan for historic preservation and on the locational atlas and index of historic sites. The sector plan recommends the designation of a new site and district as an amendment to the master plan for historic preservation. This section is broken into different groupings. The first one are resources that are already listed in the master plan for historic preservation, which is the Clarksburg School Master Plan Historic Site and the Clarksburg Plan Historic District. You'll see recommendations 1 through 3 really are about honoring that previous designation, moving forward. The next is resources listed in the locational atlas and index of historic sites. There is only one, which is Dowden's Ordinary, and a recommendation related to it, which is for parks, collaborate with parks to evaluate the archaeological significance of Dowden's Ordinary Special Park for listing in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation at the time of any future park improvement. And then a third, resources listed in the burial sites inventory. Clarksburg plan area includes 2 sites listed in the burial sites inventory, 1 known site, the Community of Faith United Methodist Church Cemetery, and 1 approximate site, the Lithicum Family Burial Ground, and has a recommendation related to just preserving, protecting the burial sites during the preliminary plan and subdivision review process per the code. So council staff suggests the committee recommend approval of the ones we've just listed related to resources already designated, resources on the locational atlas, and the burial sites inventory.
Yeah, I'll just note we got a lot of support on the capital budget related to the preservation and protection of historic Black communities and sites around the county, and an ongoing effort that is happening and has occurred with one of some of our most prominent civil rights leaders over the last several decades. Several of them testified. I'll just note this is an example of perhaps a lesser known, lesser talked about, somewhat smaller community, but no less important to the fabric of the history of the county. And as we approach the 250th year of the county and the country, these sites are so important. They're sites, they're symbols, they tell the stories, and they are the history. And I'm just really pleased that we're doing the right thing here and making sure that we're protecting and preserving that. And it was great to all be there together to talk about the history as a body. So I really appreciate that. Appreciate Ms. Ballo for being here. Happy to turn it to you if you have anything to add, but I think it was covered pretty well. Thank you. Okay, let's continue.
Okay, we're going to now move to the new sites and districts evaluated for historic designation. Montgomery Planning evaluated 2 sites and 1 district for listing in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation: the Community of Faith United Methodist Church and Cemetery, the Clarksburg Heights Subdivision, and the ComSat Laboratories. The HPC, or Historic Preservation Commission, is charged with providing recommendations to the board. It recommended all 3 resources for designation. Planning staff, who also provide the board with recommendations on designations, supports listing the Community of Faith United Methodist Church and Cemetery site and the Clarksburg Heights District in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation. However, planning staff did not recommend the designation of the ComSat Laboratories in the Master Plan for Historic Preservation. The first one we'll cover here is the Community of Faith United Methodist Church and Cemetery site. The plan provides 6 recommendations related to it. You'll see that the first has to do with finding that it meets certain criteria. The second, it recommends it for designation. And the number 8, the last one, is about the environmental setting. Very similarly, Clarksburg Heights District explains what it is. Recommendation 9 talks about the designation criteria. 10 recommends it be designated, and 11 sets the environmental setting. Council staff has a comment on this, which is really related to recommendations 6 and 9, which state what the findings of are related to the designation criteria. These criteria and others that are used by the board in making its recommendation to the council, but the council in turn, it considers the board's recommendation to amend the master plan. It does not need to make a specific finding with relationship to designation criteria. There's nothing in the county code that requires the council to undertake a finding related to criteria. The sector plan does not need to include it as a recommendation. It can definitely include it as factual material. In fact, the Tacoma Park minor master plan amendment that was most recently approved by the council had a recommendation for amendments to the master plan for historic preservation, but did not include the criteria as a recommendation in and of itself, just the designation. So council staff suggests that the recommendations 6 and 9 be provided in text, but just not be delineated as recommendations.
Any comments from Historic Preservation, Ms. Ball?
Thank you, Chair Friedson, and thank you, Ms. Dunn, for the presentation so far. I have no issues with the recommendations for the edits by council staff. I will admit, in our previous master plans, we have been a little inconsistent in how we have brought forward these findings. So I did just want to point out for the council members that our 1979 master plan for historic preservation does state in reference to the evaluation criteria that then went into our ordinance in chapter 24A. The 1979 master plan states the following evaluation criteria, and then it lists all of them that we use, the planning board uses as well, were developed and used by an advisory committee from the 1970s. The evaluation criteria are included in the ordinance for use by the Historic Preservation Commission, the Montgomery County Planning Board, and the Montgomery County Council in their decision. So Ms. Dunn is absolutely correct. You are not required to make findings in reference to these criteria, but they are there and included in the Historic Preservation Master Plan for you to consider if you so choose as part of your decision making.
Great. Okay. There to consider, but not necessary to delineate per the council staff recommendation.
Correct. But there is a reference to the council using them in the master plan if you'd like to.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Great. Without objection, everybody agrees. So let's continue.
Thank you. The next we have the ComSat Laboratories building. This building was completed in 1969. It was constructed as a research facility and headquarters for the Communications Satellite Corporation. It's nearly 500,000 square foot building, was designed by the world-renowned architect Cesar Pelle, and the building has sat unoccupied for over 2 decades. You will see there are recommendations 12 through 14 related to this property. And similar to the recommendation we just made and discussed, it would suggest that recommendation 12 be deleted. And again, it is already included in the text in the very first chapter related to this section. So it does state the criteria and what was already met, just not as a recommendation. The recommendations would start with that the county council does not, that the planning board has recommended that the county council not list the property in the master plan for historic preservation, but then provides for a whole list of things that would happen under the fact that the building would not be preserved. In fact, it would then require that contribution of funds to a historic preservation grant program occur, that there's documentation submitted to the Library of Congress. It goes on to explain what that is. It provided historic interpretation on the building site and display public art and placemaking and documentation of the lobby mural inside. The only other comment from council staff on this at the top of page 22 is in the text of the plan. There is language about a conversation that they have it in past tense coordinated with the property owners related to mitigation, just changing it to more forward-looking text because that's what master plans do. So it's just more of a stylistic thing or it could be deleted. I'm not sure how relevant it has to be in the master plan. It's really between an MNC PPC operation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, I appreciate that it's in here for reference now, but the master plan is going to be here for 20 plus years. 15 years from now is a reference to the fact that this is being worked on. Is that going to be relevant to have in a master plan? I mean, that would be my only. I don't really feel strongly about it one way or the other, to be honest with you. It's a statement of fact, but I'm just curious if there's a reason to keep it in to reference that it's being worked on.
I'm happy to take that question. We think that it could stay or it could go. It does reference actions that are ongoing right now, discussions between the planning department and the property owner. We had thought it was appropriate to leave it in here right now, but we have no objection to it being removed or to it being amended as the council staff has proposed.
All right, I don't really feel strongly, so we can just leave it in as council staff has recommended unless anybody has concerns. Okay.
We'll make the edits. Okay, and with that, the council staff suggests the committee recommend approval of the planning board's recommendations related to the CONSAT Laboratories building with the revision noted above.
Without objection, it's 3-0. Oh, Councilmember Jawanda.
Not objecting, just want to make a brief comment. I appreciate all the work that was done by planning and the community engagement on this. Obviously, we heard a lot. This is probably the thing we heard about the most in the public hearing, and I know Councilmember Balcom has heard about it a lot, as have the members of PHP. And I just want to emphasize, and I think these steps are really important this is a historic building. We want to make sure that that history is preserved and told, and I think a lot of these steps will help. And this is a premier spot, as was discussed, for a potential economic development, a location of a large company. All of us have been discussing that, and that is important, I think, for the county. It's important in this discussion. And it's also important to note that it's been this long that nothing has happened. And if there was an adaptive reuse, I think we would have seen it by now. But however, this really needs to be focused on strong economic development. And I think this is a unique site, as we've discussed. So just want to thank everyone for their comments on it. And even though we're going to agree pretty easily here today, we know there was a lot of discussion, and I appreciated the discussion with the community and with the ownership and the work of planning and colleagues. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, a lot of thought, a lot of care.
I agreed. I just want to say that. It's loud over here. I'm so sorry. I'm in the middle of General Assembly.
All right. Well, we all agree, which is good, and appreciate the thought and the care on this. Obviously, these are weighty issues, serious, significant issues. There's a lot of balance that we have to find when we address these issues, but appreciate the work here and ultimately the recommendation. So we have a 3-0 recommendation on this. Let's continue.
Great, thank you. We are now going to have a very brief section on cultural heritage, where the plan makes 2 more recommendations that are to collaborate with and support local partners to explore ways to interpret existing and proposed historic sites, and to incorporate cultural resources and community landmarks in wayfinding systems, especially near Stringtown Road and Frederick Road, which will be near the new library. And council staff suggests the committee support these recommendations.
Without objection.
Okay. With that, we are on community facilities. This is on pages 95 through 100 in the plan. The Clarksburg sector plan area is served by numerous public facilities. It has public safety, the 5th District Police Department in the northern portion of the county serves the plan area, and the Clarksburg Fire Station number 35 also serves the plan area. The public schools, as we've mentioned, in the plan area are Clarksburg Elementary School, Rocky Hill Middle School, and Clarksburg High School. There's an ongoing boundary study, as the council is well aware, which will have implications down the road. For community facilities, the closest recreation centers, as we've already talked about today in Clarksburg, to Clarksburg, are in Germantown, Damascus, Montgomery Village. Germantown is also Clarksburg's closest destination for an indoor and an outdoor public pool. So the plan supports development of a recreation center and or aquatic center in or near the plan area, especially a part of future development opportunities. And then with respect to public utilities, there was a longer section on this, which is interesting. It notes that the plan area is already connected to public drinking water managed through WSSC. So it is already approved for connection or any need for extension, and the plan area properties are either currently connected to WSSC's sewer collection system or they're in a sewer service category that permits future connection. The plan did note there was one area that could be problematic in the future, but would be evaluated as applications for any development are brought forward. There are community facility goals. You'll see those at the bottom of page 23 and the top of page 24. And then there are community facility recommendations, and those are broken into the different categories we've just mentioned. The first is with public schools. There are recommendations related to wayfinding, both to Clarksburg High School and Clarksburg Neighborhood Park, Rocky Hill Middle School, and then also wayfinding and access to the tennis courts at Rocky Hill Middle School. Again, the repeated recommendation of related to lighting of tennis and basketball courts at Rocky Hill Middle School. And then some of the other ones are more related to transportation. Again, they're copied from the transportation sections, or they coordinated with it. You can see those all through the middle of page 24 of the staff report, and council staff suggest the committee recommend approval of these recommendations.
Great. Without objection,
Okay.
let's continue.
All right, we have community facilities. The plan suggests that there's directional signage to Dowden's Ordinary Special Park from the new planned library. And then, again, similar language about developing the recreation center in the plan area. With that, council staff makes the similar edit that she's made in other places, just to be consistent throughout the plan, to mention the recreation center with the school site. And then there's the section on public utilities. Again, council staff suggests the committee recommend approval of these as written.
Without objection. Is that thumbs up? Okay. Sorry. I only had the thumb, so I had to make sure that it was not a finger, it was a thumb.
Okay.
I'm used to that, by the way. See what. Anyway, without objection.
Okay, we are done with today's section. I will just remind everyone, yes, we will be back on the 23rd. It will be the neighborhood recommendations, which will include zoning, and the implementation section.
And good news is, so far, we don't really have any follow-up items. We've gone through this methodically, and there really isn't
Great.
anything to come back on. So appreciate all of the coordination and collaboration between the planning staff and parks team and council staff, as well as colleagues, and the district council member. Wishing everybody well, and we are going to dismiss this item and be back on February 23rd. So thank you for that on our regularly scheduled programming on Monday afternoons. Thank you to everybody also for the adjustment for today for scheduling purposes. With that, we're going to move on to item 2 on our agenda. We're going to call up our executive branch partners. I believe DHCA is here, and Mr. Nagam from council staff is going to make his way up. And we're going to move on to Executive Regulation 2125, Emergency Safety Plans for Multifamily Apartment Buildings. I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate Councilmember Stewart for her leadership on this. This is a regulation that is being put in place to respond to a clear need that was identified, unfortunately, in the aftermath of a horrific tragedy. And I just appreciate all of the time and care and attention that she's provided, the leadership that she's shown. We had a number of hearings in response to it. This was one of several things that came out of those public conversations and the private conversations that she has had with the Diaz family, and just want to acknowledge them before I turn to her, and don't want to take anything away from what she's going to share. But this is a family that is responding to a tragedy in such an inspiring way, including a significant commitment to our fire rescue services to provide new technology that has been utilized in other parts of the world to save lives of first responders, and to save lives for those who would otherwise die or have serious injuries from smoke inhalation in burning buildings. And I just want to acknowledge them and the inspiration that they've shown all of us in how a family can respond to an unthinkable situation and do it with such grace and such class and such compassion that I can't even imagine or really fathom. So With that, let me turn it over to Councilmember Stewart for any comments on this, and just want to express my appreciation again for all of your leadership.
Thank you, and I also want to thank the Diaz family because they have been really wonderful in, through their grief, wanting to make sure that their daughter Melanie's life is remembered, and remembered in a way of how she lived, and through many of their actions that they are taking, they're doing that. And I do want to also note the Diaz family live in Florida, and they come up here all the time to work with us, to help keep Melanie's memory alive. And I really do want to thank them. I also want to thank Dr. Stoddard, our fire and rescue, our fire marshal, the folks at DPS and DHCA, because in the aftermath of the Uri fire, there were a lot of questions on fire inspections and what was done and what was known and how we can do better. The outgrowth of that was, one piece of it was the tenant protection and notification bill that has many different pieces of it. And today we're reviewing the emergency safety plans for multifamily buildings. That is an outgrowth of that legislation. And, the fact that we have over 6,000 buildings that these regulations will apply to, and that unfortunately what we found out in the aftermath of that fire a few years ago is that many or most of our buildings don't have fire safety plans in place. And even those that do, they're not always regularly communicated with the residents who live in those buildings. And when literally seconds matter to save lives, making sure that there is a solid fire safety plan in place that residents know about is so critical. So I just want to say thank you to our fire marshal, to DPS, to DHCA, and everyone for working on this, because I also know it took a bit to get this done, to make sure you all were covering all the bases, that it had what was appropriate in here to ensure people's safety. So, and I thank the PHP committee for taking this up.
Thank you. And now let me turn to council staff. You can walk us through the packet, and just want to express appreciation to DHCA for their work and their efforts. The director is here on looking, but we'll turn it over to council staff.
Sure.
Thanks.
Good morning. So the executive regulation was transmitted by executive on November 25th. It's a Method 2 regulation. It implements portions of Bill 7-24, as noted by the chair, which was approved by the council on July 2024. As it relates to the regulation itself, the bill covers more requirements than the regulation, but the regulation does require landlords of multifamily rental housing to prepare and submit emergency fire safety plans to DPS for review and approval. These plans must be updated and resubmitted every 3 years. The plans must be included in a lease agreement for any prospective leases for tenants to understand the plan. It also requires essentially an analysis of call data to determine if there's any false fire alarms and what the landlord will strategize in terms of dealing with those. There's also a fee schedule established by the regulation of $95 per filing. There are associated expenditures, but that will be, there's an estimate of expenditures, but we have not received a formal budget request from the executive yet to provide for those resources. Other than that, the only other issues staff identified was an implementation date. There is no implementation date, so this will be adopted and take effect upon adoption by the council. So the committee may wish to discuss if there is a desire to include a later implementation date. And I raised that because that was a comment brought forth during the public comment period as well. But other than that, DPS does have a PowerPoint presentation they can walk through on the requirements of the regulation.
Thank you.
Please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Patsy Warnick from DPS. I'm the fire marshal for the county, and I manage our fire code compliance team. So I have a brief presentation to go over most of the items we've already discussed. As you know, this is an outreach of the Bill 724, And this ER 2125 is a new section of the Fire Code, Chapter 22 for the county. So it is in the Bill 724, DPS had a mandate to adopt Method 2 regulations, and so here are the regulations. The basis of the ER comes from the Life Safety Code that we already enforce and the DPS Fire Code, or the County Fire Code that is already enforced by DPS FCC. So this is simply a product of that, and then future long-term, I believe we will try to codify it as part of one of the amendments to the Life Safety Code that we adopt locally. So for development, we collaborated with DHCA and Emergency Management and Fire Rescue to come up with a best practices document, sort of a how-to instruction guide for the template that we put together. It's available on our website, and for applicants to access both the template and the user guide and frequently asked questions. So it has its own web page so that users, applicants can access it online, and all of our submittals and reviews are also digital, so they're online. We plan to make this part of the annual fire code compliance permits that most businesses, including apartments, are required to have. It's specific to apartments and not condominiums. But again, there are so many multifamily buildings that we estimate that this will be a large percentage of those buildings will need to come up with an emergency safety plan. Let's see here. Resources, as mentioned, we will need additional FTEs to process the workload, which is notifying these multifamily buildings in particular. They have not an annual inspection rate because it's not possible for us to get to them annually, but every 2 or 3 years. And so we want to make sure that we align the inspection schedule, the periodic inspections, with the needed submittals. These emergency plans need to be submitted every 3 years for our review and approval. And then we will have inspectors work with landlords on site if needed to develop those plans. Our reviewer, currently we have one reviewer and myself, and we will work with landlords as they submit plans. We don't want to reject them and have them resubmit several times. We want them to submit the plans. If there are deficiencies or areas of improvement, then we will work with them to iron those out and then get those approved so that they have them downloadable as approved and available to other agencies as needed. They can incorporate them into their lease, and they can be provided on demand to renters. Other considerations, part of the ER contains the requirement for an addendum that if these multifamily buildings receive 10 or more fire calls, and we have defined fire calls in the ER, fire calls in a 12-month period, a rolling 12-month period, then they will be required to add an addendum which walks through how they plan to mitigate these calls, whether they are malicious calls where people are, we have often teenagers that want to pull the fire alarm, or if they are, in fact, false alarms or there's some malfunction of the system, we want to make sure that the system is repaired or replaced to make sure that the building has an effective and working fire alarm system. So there is some cost recovery. Obviously, we are an enterprise fund, so we will be charging a fee for the review on if warranted, and rarely we may charge for a re-review, but typically the review fee, which currently is $95, will be charged the once every 3 years or per submittal, and for the submittal of and review of the addendum. Our inspections, as they are for all other fire inspections, are continued to be free. This is our flyer currently for emergency safety plans. We've been doing community outreach with Fire and Rescue and a couple of other agencies to promote the emergency safety plan, at least raise awareness that it's available. It has a QR code to take you to the webpage and some overall information. And we plan to hand these out as well to the apartment buildings as we inspect them, so to help get landlords moving in the right direction towards creating these emergency plans. And the last flyer here is a general flyer for our fire code compliance permits that we hand out to all businesses. We also hand them out to apartment buildings, but it just has basic information about the annual fire code compliance permit. And that is all that I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, thank you. Appreciate the presentation and the work. Any questions? Seeing.
Just one brief question.
Okay, please.
Yeah. Thank you for all the work. I think I heard this, but every 2 to 3 years, and then this will go into effect immediately. And did you have any feedback on that question raised by council of whether you're ready to do that? I mean, obviously we all want this to happen as soon as possible. So just wanted to hear feedback on that point.
Yes, we are. So we have the website up and running. We have our fire code compliance permits available through ePlans, which is where all our applications through DPS are submitted. And so users are already submitting their permits online, and some have already even submitted their emergency safety plans for review. So we have piloted this a little bit, and we are ready to start reviewing.
Great, awesome. Well, please, I know you will send it to us. I'll make sure we all I'll put it in our newsletters. We want to help you get the word out. We often make that request, so this is super important. So thank you, and thank you to the Councilmember Stewart for moving this forward, and on behalf of the Diaz family, but so many families. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Without any other questions or concerns that I see, all those in favor of supporting the executive regulation, keep by raising your hand. That's 3-0. We will forward this along to the full council with appreciation to Councilmember Stewart, to council staff, to our fire inspector, and to all of the team at DHCA for their work on this, and to Dr. Stoddard, who has worked on this and everything related to these fire safety, building safety related issues. We appreciate his leadership as well. And with that, colleagues, we are adjourned.
Thank you.